Chapter 1: The Cone. The cone didn't stand a chance. It was a cheerful, offensively bright orange, the kind of orange that suggested the world was a fundamentally safe and orderly place. It wobbled once, as if making a final appeal to the universe, and then succumbed to the front bumper of a 2012 Honda Civic with a pathetic plastic clatter. "Firm. You hit the cone," Ivy said. From the driver's seat, Griffin Holloway adjusted his cuffs. The suit was a dark, severe charcoal, tailored with the kind of precision that suggested the fabric had been personally apologized to before being cut. It was worth more than the car, possibly more than her apartment. Amused, "The cone," he said, was positioned aggressively. "It's a traffic cone. It's not capable of aggression." And yet, Ivy pressed her pen to the clipboard. A large, unforgiving F materialized next to the box labeled maneuverability. She'd been writing that F so often it had developed a kind of artistic flair. "The cone represents another car, Griffin, a stationary object. The goal is to park beside it, not on top of it." "Warm. If the object is stationary," he said, turning his pale gray eyes on her with an expression of genuine philosophical inquiry. "It has already conceded the space. That's not how parking works. It is how territory works. We're not talking about territory. We're talking about a Honda Civic and an orange cone in the DMV parking lot." She scribbled her signature at the bottom of the form. "You failed. Again." He accepted the paper without a flicker of disappointment. He folded it precisely and placed it inside his jacket. "Warm. Unfortunate. I shall endeavor to improve." This was the 16th time Griffin Holloway had failed his driving test. 16th, in 10 weeks. No one failed 16 times. Not even Mrs. Prescott, who was 83 and believed the turn signal was decorative. Griffin wasn't a bad driver in the way that implied he might someday be a good one. He was a philosophical objector to the entire concept of traffic. He drove as though the road should recognize his authority and yield accordingly. He produced a wallet and extracted a stack of crisp bills. He'd insisted, from the very first lesson, on paying for a full block in cash, in advance, every time he failed. Ivy's bank had started asking questions she couldn't answer. Another series of lessons, then. He placed the stack on the dashboard. "Shall we say Tuesday at dusk?" Ivy looked at the money. She looked at her schedule, which she kept in a battered planner because the scheduling app on her phone had stopped working and she couldn't afford the premium version. 3 cancellations this week. 2 students who'd gone to the new franchise academy on Route 9, the one with the flashy signs and the fleet of brand new cars. Her Honda needed brake pads. Her lease was up for renewal in 2 months, and the landlord had made noises about raising the rent. She needed his money. She hated that she needed his money. "Fine," she said. "Tuesday. But we're working on 3-point turns, and if you treat the curb like a personal adversary again, I'm charging you for tire damage." The curb was encroaching. Curbs don't encroach, Griffin. That one was several inches further into the road than the municipal standard. How could you possibly know the municipal curb standard? I read extensively. She drove them back to the lot. When he got out, she noticed, not for the first time, the ring on his right hand. A heavy signet, dark metal, old-looking. A bar of afternoon sun slanted through the windshield, and he adjusted the ring. A quick twist, shifting his hand into the shadow of the doorframe. Playful. "Does the sun bother you?" she asked. "I have sensitive skin. They make SPF 100 now." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, amused. "I will take that under advisement." "Tuesday," he confirmed, standing beside the car. His posture was very straight, very still. Not military stiff, but something else. Composed in a way that made ordinary stillness look fidgety by comparison. "Tuesday," she said. He turned to leave and then paused. "Your front right tire. What about it?" "The pressure is low. Approximately 8 psi below the recommended level. There is a slow leak." She stared at him. "How could you possibly know that?" He was quiet for a moment. "I am attentive to details." "That's not a detail. That's a diagnosis. Are you secretly a mechanic?" "I am not secretly a mechanic. A beat. I am, however, correct." She got out after he left and checked the tire. He was correct. Damn him. That night, Ivy lay on her couch, staring at the ceiling. Marmalade, her ginger cat, was purring on her chest with the aggressive entitlement of a creature who believed the entire apartment existed to serve his comfort. Whispered, 16 failures, Marmalade, 16. The cat kneaded her sweater. Nobody fails 16 times, not even people who are actually bad at driving. He parallel parks like he's declaring war on geometry. But then he diagnoses my tire pressure from the driver's seat. She rolled over, dislodging the cat, who gave an indignant chirp. And he pays in cash. Who pays in cash? In those amounts? His bank doesn't ask questions because I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a bank. He has a vault. With a dragon. She picked up her phone and Googled Griffin Holloway. Nothing. A few results for DJ in Bristol and a breed of dog. No billionaire eccentrics with bespoke suits and a philosophical objection to traffic cones. Who are you? She muttered. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Lease renewal. Please call to discuss new terms. She closed her eyes. The new terms would not be favorable. The new terms were never favorable. She was running a one-woman driving school out of a rented office and a Honda with 180,000 miles on it, competing against a franchise with a marketing budget and matching polo shirts. She was, by most measures, losing. But she had Griffin Holloway and his apparently infinite supply of $100 bills. And for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, that felt like the only thing keeping the whole operation from collapsing. Is it working? She thought. She didn't know what the question meant. She didn't know who was asking. Marmalade settled back on her chest, purring with the certainty of a creature who had never once questioned his place in the world. Whispered. Maybe, she whispered. Shut up. The cat blinked. It had not spoken. Chapter 2. The Self-Checkout. SFX. Car doors, engine starting, seatbelt click. Tuesday arrived. Griffin was already waiting in the lot when she pulled in, standing beside a black sedan so expensive it made the surrounding cars look apologetic. He was wearing a different suit, equally severe, equally worth more than her rent. The ring caught the late afternoon sun, and she thought she saw him adjust it. A quick twist, before his hand dropped to his side. Ready? She said. I am always ready, he said, folding himself into the Civic's passenger seat. His knees were approximately level with the dashboard. Firm. This vehicle is compact. It's a normal-sized car. I disagree, playful. The car doesn't care about your opinion, seatbelt. He clicked it with a slight grimace, as though the mechanism were beneath him. She pulled out of the lot and headed for the residential streets where she ran practice routes. Today we're doing 3-point turns, she said. The goal is to reverse the car's direction using a 3-point maneuver, not a 17-point maneuver, not a philosophical inquiry into the nature of direction. 3 points. I understand the concept. Do you? Because last time you reversed into a mailbox and then told me the postal service should relocate. The placement was impractical. It's been there for 40 years. An oversight. They practiced. He was marginally better. His turns were tighter, his spatial awareness improved from hostile to merely antagonistic. He completed a 3-point turn without property damage. She found herself watching his hands on the wheel, those long, precise fingers, perfectly still. No tapping, no fidgeting, no drumming. And then she noticed something else, shocked. Are you breathing? He glanced at her. What? You haven't breathed. In like a minute. You've been holding your breath through the entire maneuver. A pause. Then a deliberate inhale, as though he'd just been reminded how. I was concentrating. People breathe when they concentrate. That's the whole point of breathing. It's involuntary, nervous. I have unusual focus. You have unusual everything. He completed another turn. This time she watched his chest. It didn't move. Not once during the full maneuver. Then, when he straightened the wheel, a single breath, performed rather than automatic, like a man remembering to blink. Good, she said, deciding to file this in the folder rather than push it. That was actually good, he inclined his head. I had an excellent instructor. Don't get sentimental on me. You still haven't checked your mirror. I was aware of the vehicle behind us. You didn't look. I heard it, she paused. You heard a Prius, from inside the car, with the windows up. The engine has a distinctive whine, electric, approximately 40 meters behind. traveling at 22 miles per hour. He glanced at her. Is that not normal, Enos? That is extremely not normal. He said nothing. His hands rested on the steering wheel, perfectly still. She noticed, as she often did, that his fingers didn't fidget. Ever. Most people tapped the wheel, adjusted their grip, drummed along to whatever was in their head. Griffin's hands sat exactly where he placed them, like they'd been carved there. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She glanced at it. A notification from her bank. Payment declined. Insufficient funds. The brake pad order. She'd scheduled it 3 days ago. Problem? Griffin asked. Firm. No. She silenced the phone. Focus on the road. He focused on the road. But she caught his eyes flicking to the phone, once, and then away. He'd seen it. He had to have seen it, with whatever freakish eagle vision let him diagnose tire pressure from the driver's seat. He didn't mention it. She was grateful for that. After the lesson, she needed to stop at the grocery store. She usually went alone, but Griffin was standing beside the Civic when she came out of the office, apparently waiting for his car to arrive. I need to run into the store, she said. 5 minutes. I will accompany you. You don't need to accompany me to a grocery store. Warm. I have never been inside one. She stopped walking. You've never been in a grocery store. I have not had occasion. Occasion. It's a grocery store. You go in, you buy food. I don't eat food. The sentence landed between them with a small, dense thud. She blinked. He seemed to realize what he'd said and adjusted smoothly. I have a restricted diet. I order my meals through a service. Right, she said slowly. A service. Yes. Okay. Well, come on then. Welcome to Safeway. The automatic doors opened, and Griffin walked through them with the cautious dignity of an ambassador entering a foreign parliament. He surveyed the produce section with the expression of a man who had been told the earth was flat and was seeing mountains for the first time. This is all food, he said. Yes. In one building. That's the concept. There are entire nations that could not produce this variety in a decade. I mean, it's mostly corn syrup in different configurations, but sure. He picked up an avocado and examined it like a jeweler appraising a suspect gemstone. What is this? Avocado, put it down. We're here for coffee and cat food. He put it down with obvious reluctance and followed her through the aisles, asking questions about everything. Why was bread pre-sliced? What was the purpose of the loyalty card? Why did the cereal aisle require an entire wall? She answered on autopilot, grabbing coffee, cat food, and a box of granola bars, while he cataloged the modern world's relationship with sustenance like a visiting anthropologist. SFX, grocery store ambiance, checkout beeps, muzak. Then they reached the self-checkout. What is this machine? He asked, studying the screen with intense focus. Self-checkout. You scan your own items and pay. The store trusts its patrons to accurately report their purchases. In theory. Fascinating. An honor system for commerce. She scanned the coffee. The machine beeped. She scanned the cat food. The machine beeped again, cheerfully. She scanned the granola bars. Unexpected item in the bagging area. What? Said Griffin. It does this sometimes. You just have to, please remove the item and try again. She removed the granola bars and rescanned them. Unexpected item in the bagging area. Firm. The item is expected, Griffin said to the machine, his voice carrying the precise, measured tone of a man accustomed to being obeyed. I watched her place it there. It is granola. It is not unexpected. Please wait for assistance. Firm. I do not require assistance. The machine requires better judgment. Griffin, it can't hear you. Then it is poorly designed. He leaned closer to the screen. His breath did not fog the glass, though the store was cold enough that hers did. I have witnessed the rise and fall of empires that functioned with greater competence than this terminal. Please don't lecture the self-checkout. It started it. A teenager in a Safeway vest approached, looking nervous. Can I help? Yes, Griffin said, turning to him with the full weight of his attention. The teenager took a half step back. This device has accused my companion of introducing an unexpected item. The item is granola. Granola is a predictable purchase in a food establishment. I would like an explanation, and if possible, an apology. It doesn't apologize? Then the manufacturer should. The teenager stared at him. He stared at the machine. He pressed a button. The error cleared. It just does that sometimes, the teenager said. Firm. Unacceptable, Griffin said. Ivy grabbed his arm to pull him toward the exit and felt the cold through his jacket sleeve, deep and fundamental, as though the fabric were wrapped around winter itself. She let go quickly. Your arm is freezing. Poor circulation. You keep saying that. That's not what poor circulation feels like. Poor circulation is cold fingers. Your entire arm is the temperature of a park bench in January. I run cold. You run hypothermic. He held the grocery bag while she unlocked the car. Their fingers brushed on the handle. His touch was cool and dry and absolutely still. And the warmth of her hand against his made the contrast so sharp she almost flinched. He didn't. He looked at the point of contact, their fingers on the plastic bag, with an expression she'd never seen on him before. Something between hunger and wonder and a very old, very careful restraint. Thank you, she said, taking the bag. Of course, he said, and his voice was half an octave lower than it had been inside the store. In the parking lot, she let it out, a full, genuine laugh that echoed off the concrete. He watched her with that expression she'd started recognizing, the one that wasn't quite confusion and wasn't quite amusement, but was something adjacent to both. I failed to see the humor, he said, but the corner of his mouth did a small, involuntary thing. You lectured a self-checkout machine about the fall of empires. It was insubordinate. It's a machine, Griffin. Then it was a poorly calibrated machine. She wiped her eyes. Tuesday and Thursday, she said. Same time. And next time, I'm picking the route. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Chapter 3. The Thermos. SFX. Car engine idling. Quiet residential street. 3 weeks in, she knew his habits. He arrived precisely 7 minutes early. He adjusted his ring when sunlight was strong. He didn't eat, didn't drink coffee, didn't chew gum, and he carried a thermos. Playful. What do you do, she asked one Thursday, idling at a red light. When you're not failing driving tests. I read. That's it, you read. Warm. I read extensively. I have a great deal of time. How much time? He looked at her. More than most. That's vague. It is intentionally vague. What did you do last night? I read a history of the Napoleonic Wars. Then I reorganized my bookshelves by century of publication. Then I stood at my window for approximately 2 hours. You stood at your window for 2 hours. Doing what? Whispered. Standing, a beat. Thinking. About what? About why the 3-point turn I executed in lesson 14 was unsatisfactory, when it met every technical requirement you specified. Because you clipped the curb. The curb was, if you say encroaching, I'm pulling over. He almost smiled. The light changed. She drove. What about you? He asked. What do you do when you are not teaching people to navigate traffic? Nervous. I worry about money. The words came out before she could filter them. She heard them land and wanted to take them back. I mean, I manage the business. There's a lot of paperwork. The business is not doing well. The business is fine. Your phone receives notifications from your bank that cause your jaw to tighten. Your brake pads need replacing. You have not upgraded the scheduling software because the premium version is $18 a month. Are you monitoring my finances? I am monitoring your jaw. The financial conclusions follow. She gripped the wheel. I'm competing against a franchise with 30 cars and a billboard on the highway. I have 1 car and a clipboard. It's not a fair fight. No, he agreed. It is not. The silence was different from his usual silences. It was warm, attentive, as though he were listening to something beneath her words. Warm. You are very good at this, he said. At what? Teaching, explaining, making complex things navigable. I have met a great many educators in my... He caught himself. In my experience, you are among the best. You've taken lessons from other instructors? I was referring to a broader context. How broad? Quite broad. He adjusted his ring. My point is that your business deserves to succeed. And the franchise with 30 cars and a billboard is not better than you. It is merely louder. She didn't know what to say to that. It was the kindest thing anyone had said about her work in a long time. delivered with the quiet conviction of someone who had apparently formed strong opinions about the driving instruction industry. Whispered, "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," he paused. "The light is green." "I know the light is green." "You have been sitting at it for 4 seconds." "I know." It was matte black, expensive, the kind of container that kept temperature for 24 hours, according to its marketing, and probably longer according to Griffin's standards. He drank from it before lessons, occasionally during, and always after. He kept it in the cup holder next to her water bottle. "What is that?" she asked one Thursday, gesturing at the thermos. "A beverage." "What kind of beverage?" "A personal one." "A personal beverage, like a smoothie?" "Not like a smoothie." She reached for it. His hand moved fast and closed over the thermos before her fingers got there. Not violent, not aggressive, but fast enough that she hadn't seen him start. One moment his hand was on the wheel, the next, it was on the thermos. "It's not to your taste," he said, his voice carefully light. She looked at his hand on the thermos, then at his eyes. Something had shifted in them, a deepening of the gray, a cold edge she hadn't seen before. It lasted less than a second. "Okay," she said. "Your thermos, your business." He relaxed. The gray warmed back to its usual temperature, but she filed it away, the way she filed everything about him, in the mental folder labeled "Things That Don't Add Up." The folder was getting thick. That same lesson, she was reaching across the console to adjust the rearview mirror, and her hand brushed his on the gear shift. She pulled back by reflex, but the sensation lingered. Cold, not cold hands in winter cold. Cold like stone, cold like something that had never generated its own heat. "Your hands are freezing," she said. "Poor circulation," he said. "You should see a doctor." "Doctors are not helpful in my case." "In your case. What case is that?" "The case of a man who runs cold." She let it go, but she'd touched him before, brief accidental contacts during lessons. And she'd noticed it every time. The cold wasn't situational. It wasn't poor circulation or bad weather. It was fundamental. It was him. The following Tuesday, a black car pulled up to the lot at the end of the lesson. A man got out of the driver's side, tall, mid-50s in appearance, with the composed bearing of someone who had been professionally patient for a very long time. He wore a gray suit, less severe than Griffin's, but equally precise. "Ah," Griffin said. "Miles." "My lord," Miles said, and then caught himself. "My apologies, Griffin. The appointment has been moved to 9. "Miles, this is Ivy, my instructor." Miles turned to her. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "Miss Kessler, I've heard a great deal about you. Good things, I hope. You have survived 16 lessons without incident. In my experience, that qualifies as remarkable." He glanced at Griffin with the expression of someone watching a toddler attempt to eat soup with a fork, fond, patient, slightly incredulous that this was happening again. "He has been practicing at home, in the parking structure." He knocked over a pillar. "A structural pillar?" Ivy asked. "A decorative one," Griffin said. "It was decorative." "It was load-bearing," Miles corrected gently. "The east corner of the garage now lists slightly to the left. I've contacted an engineer." "An overreaction." "The engineer disagrees." Ivy looked between them. The dynamic was clear. Miles was the adult. Griffin was a highly competent, deeply dignified man, who was somehow also a disaster. "Well," she said, "at least he's practicing." Miles looked at her. Something in his expression softened. "Yes," he said. "He is." The way he said it suggested he wasn't entirely talking about driving. Griffin excused himself to take a phone call, stepping away with the thermos. Miles lingered by the Civic. "How long have you worked for him?" Ivy asked. "A long time," Miles said. "Longer than most. He's unusual," amused. "He is unusual in the way that a forest fire is unusual. It is not boring, and it does change the landscape, but one does occasionally wish for a quiet evening." "That's very specific." "I have had time to refine the analogy." Miles paused, watching Griffin across the lot, phone to his ear, gesturing at something with the thermos in his other hand. "May I be direct? Please." "He is very taken with you, Miss Kessler. I have not seen him this engaged with anything in a very long time. He practices three-point turns in the parking structure at midnight. He knocked over a load-bearing pillar. A load-bearing pillar. The east corner of the garage now lists slightly to the left. I've contacted an engineer. Is the engineer concerned? The engineer is fascinated. It takes a remarkable amount of force to dislodge a concrete pillar. Griffin was reversing at approximately 4 miles per hour. That doesn't make sense. No, Miles agreed pleasantly. It does not. Griffin returned, pocketing his phone. He unscrewed the thermos and took a long drink. The lid came off at the angle where Ivy could see the liquid inside, just for a moment. And it was too thick, too dark, too red for coffee or juice or any normal thing. He caught her looking. His hand tightened on the thermos, very slightly. Nervous. Green juice, he said. That's not green. It's a beet variety. It's red. Beets are red. Griffin, that looks like... It's beet juice, Miles said smoothly, appearing at Griffin's elbow with the precision of someone who had been interrupting awkward conversations for centuries. I make it fresh, an acquired taste. Shall we, my lord Griffin? The structural engineer is waiting. Griffin capped the thermos. His eyes held hers for a beat too long. The gray had that edge to it again, the faint deepening she'd started noticing. Then he turned and followed Miles to the sedan. Beet juice, Ivy said to the empty parking lot. She didn't believe it for a second. That Thursday, Griffin parked the Civic on a residential street for a three-point turn drill. He was better, noticeably. His turns were clean, his awareness was sharp, and he was, she suspected, actually paying attention to her instructions, rather than treating them as mild suggestions from a lesser species. She was marking the form when she caught her thumb on the metal clip of the clipboard. A paper cut, thin and sharp. A bead of blood welled at the edge. Ow, she said, shaking her hand. Stupid clip. She looked up. Griffin had stopped moving, not paused, stopped. The way a photograph stops. His hands were exactly where they'd been, his posture unchanged. But the life in him, the subtle animation that made a person rather than a statue, had drained out entirely. His eyes were fixed on her hand, on the blood. The gray of his irises had darkened. Not a trick of the light, a shift. The pale winter sky gray had deepened to something closer to smoke, closer to slate, with a faint ring of amber she'd never seen before. Griffin, nothing. Griffin. He blinked. Once, deliberately, as if reminding himself how. His jaw worked, a muscle at the hinge tightening and releasing. His hands, which hadn't moved, were now gripping the steering wheel hard enough that the leather creaked. Tense. You should... His voice was lower, half an octave below where it usually sat. You should put pressure on that. It's a paper cut. Put pressure on it. It wasn't a suggestion. She pressed her thumb to the side of her index finger, stopping the tiny bead. His shoulders dropped by a fraction. The amber ring faded. The gray returned. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, he said. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the steering wheel with the focused intensity of a man trying very hard not to look at something else. I am fine. You went weird. I did not go weird. You went statue for like 10 seconds. Your eyes did something. A pause. I am occasionally prone to distraction. That wasn't distraction. That was, she didn't have the word. She'd seen people freeze before, behind the wheel. Fear, panic. This wasn't either. This was something older, something that belonged in a documentary about predators, the instant before the strike. Drive me back, she said. Lesson's over, he drove her back, in silence. When she got out, she noticed his hands were still too precise on the wheel, still gripping with that careful, measured force. At home, she opened the mental folder and spread it out on the kitchen table of her mind. The cold skin, the thermos he wouldn't let her touch, the not eating, the hearing a Prius at 40 meters, the stillness that wasn't human, the ring he adjusted in sunlight, the eyes that shifted color at the sight of blood. Marmalade, she said to the cat, who was sitting on her laptop keyboard. I think my best student might be a serial killer. The cat yawned. Or something worse. Chapter 4, the 16th test. SFX car interior, engine idling, distant traffic. She should have canceled. Any sane person would have canceled. A man whose eyes changed color at the sight of blood and whose body temperature registered somewhere between a marble countertop and a corpse was not a man you wanted in your passenger seat. But the lease renewal was next week. 2 more students had defected to the Route 9 franchise. And Griffin's next test was scheduled for Saturday. She showed up. He showed up. They got in the car. The test route starts on Miller and runs north to the highway entrance, she said. Her voice professional, her pen ready. Ivy. Please check your mirrors and proceed, whispered Ivy. His voice was quiet. You are afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. Your heart rate is elevated. It has been since you sat down. My heart. How do you know my heart rate? He looked at her. The mask of regal composure, the one he wore like a second skin, was still there, but thinner than she'd ever seen it. I can hear it. From 3 feet away. From considerably further than that. She put her pen down. What are you, Griffin? He was quiet for a long time. In the silence, she became aware of all the things she'd been filing away for 10 weeks. The cold, the stillness, the reflexes that were too fast, the thermos, the ring, the eyes. I am very old, he said. How old? Older than this city? Older than this country. A pause. Older than most of the things you consider permanent. That's not an answer, tense. 800 years. She stared at him. He stared back. His eyes were steady and ancient and entirely serious. You're insane, she said. I am not insane. 800 years. You're telling me you're 800 years old. Approximately. Record-keeping was inconsistent in the 13th century. Griffin. The thermos contains blood. Not mine. Bagged. Donated. I feed approximately once every 3 days. More often if I am exerting control. His voice was steady, clinical, as though he were reciting medical information. The ring on my hand allows me to tolerate sunlight. Without it, I would burn, not metaphorically. My body temperature is approximately 15 degrees Celsius. I have no heartbeat to speak of, which is how I can hear yours so clearly. I do not have a reflection, which makes the DMV photo requirement an ongoing logistical challenge. Silence. You're a vampire, she said. The term is not one I would choose, but it is not inaccurate. You're a vampire who has been taking driving lessons from me for 10 weeks. Yes. In a Honda Civic. Yes. Is Miles also? Yes. The thermos. Firm. Blood. Not beet juice. The ring. Allows me to tolerate sunlight. Without it, I would burn. The cold skin. My body temperature is approximately 15 degrees Celsius. It does not change. The breathing, nervous, optional. I forget to do it when I'm concentrating. The hearing, the tire pressure, the Prius. Enhanced senses. I can hear your heartbeat from 50 meters. It is currently, he paused, significantly elevated. Shocked. Of course it's elevated. You just told me you're a vampire. The word hung in the air of the Honda Civic. Absurd and enormous. Angry. I knew you were failing on purpose, she said, her voice very controlled. I figured that out weeks ago. The eccentric rich guy who can't park but keeps showing up, I could handle that. I thought that was the weirdest thing about you. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. It wasn't even close. Ivy? How long were you going to hide it? Another 10 weeks? A year? Were you just going to sit in my car forever, pretending to be human, listening to my heartbeat from 3 feet away while I worried about brake pads? I didn't know how to tell you. You could have started any time, any Tuesday, any Thursday. Ivy, I'm 800 years old and I drink blood from a thermos, but you didn't. Because you liked it. You liked being the guy who couldn't park. He said nothing. The muscle at his jaw worked once and then went still. A ghost memory of a pulse that wasn't there. Sad. I told you things, she said, and her voice cracked. I told you about the business, about the money, about being scared. And the whole time you were sitting there with centuries of wealth and supernatural hearing, and you let me be the only one who was real. Everything I said to you was real. You're not real. The person I was talking to doesn't exist. He was a man named Griffin, who couldn't drive and had cold hands and an expensive suit. He wasn't a vampire king. He wasn't 800 years old. He wasn't this. She gestured at him, at all of him. at the gray eyes that were still and ancient and looking at her with something she couldn't bear to identify. Whispered. "The man in the car was me," he said quietly. "The worst driver you ever had. The one who was confused by the self-checkout. The one who told you your business deserved to succeed. That was me." "And the part that drinks blood? The part with no heartbeat? The part that can kill someone faster than I can blink? That's also you." "Yes." "And I'm supposed to just, reconcile those?" He didn't answer. He looked at his hands on the steering wheel. Those long, still, cold hands she'd been reaching for without knowing what they were. Angry. "I need you to go," she said. "Ivy." Firm. "I need you to go, Griffin." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened the door, unfolded his tall frame from the Civic, and stood on the sidewalk in the Saturday morning light. The ring on his hand caught the sun. She saw, now that she knew what to look for, the faint tension in his jaw, the micro-adjustment of his posture, the cost of standing in daylight, even with protection. She drove away. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. SFX. Apartment silence, cat purring, distant city noise. The apartment was too quiet. Tuesday came. The 6 o'clock slot was empty. Thursday, empty. She taught her remaining students, normal people who made normal mistakes and whose hands were a normal temperature on the steering wheel. Sad. "He lied to me, Marmalade," she said to the cat on Wednesday night. "Not about the driving. I knew about the driving. He lied about what he is." Marmalade purred. "He sat in my car for 10 weeks being a person, and he's not a person. He's a vampire. An actual vampire who drinks blood and doesn't have a heartbeat and has been alive since the Magna Carta. And I sat there, and I told him about my rent." The cat kneaded her sweater. "And the worst part is I keep thinking about the self-checkout. The way he argued with a machine about granola. That was real. That was him. But so is the part that drinks blood from a thermos. How do you reconcile those?" She stared at the ceiling, whispered. His stupid thermos, his stupid ring, his stupid, beautiful, undead face. Marmalade sat on the empty planner page, where Griffin H. 6 p.m. used to be written, as though claiming the vacancy for his own purposes. "You're not helping," she told the cat. The cat was not trying to help. Miles found Griffin in the kitchen of his brownstone, standing motionless in front of the refrigerator. The refrigerator contained exactly 3 items: a bag of O negative, a bottle of water Ivy had left in his car once that he had not thrown away, and a lemon that Miles had placed there optimistically 6 months ago. The lemon had achieved a state of being that could only be described as philosophical. Amused. "How long have you been standing there?" Miles asked. "I don't know." "Is this the same standing still episode as yesterday, or a new one?" "New." Miles opened the refrigerator, removed the blood bag, and placed it in a warmer with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times. "You need to feed." "I'm not hungry, Firm." "You are always hungry. You are specifically hungry right now. You are standing in front of the refrigerator at 2 in the afternoon, which is a time of day you usually spend being unconscious or imperious, neither of which is happening." Griffin closed the refrigerator. "She told me to leave." "Yes." "She was correct to do so." "Also, yes." Miles set a warmed glass on the counter. "You lied to her for 10 weeks. I would have told you to leave after 3. He paused. "You have also broken another phone." Griffin looked at the counter, where a smartphone lay face up with a spiderweb fracture radiating from the center of the screen. "I was attempting to type." "You were attempting to text her. I saw the draft. I apologize for the decep." And then a crack across the letter T. Warm. The T was recalcitrant. The T was a piece of glass. "You have the grip strength of an industrial press. This is the 3rd phone in a week. Tell them I have large hands." "I told them you work in construction." They were skeptical. Miles folded his hands. "You did tell me, on multiple occasions." "I did." "You responded with what I believe the modern term is main character energy, and continued failing your driving test with increasingly creative incompetence." Miles folded his hands. "The cone in Lesson 12 was inspired. I grant you that, but the self-checkout confrontation was excessive. The machine was wrong. The machine was a machine. You were a grown vampire arguing with a weighing sensor about the nature of granola." Miles paused. "You were doing so well. The confession was brave. The cones were charming. And then she found out what you are, and every honest thing you'd built was sitting on the one thing you'd hidden. Griffin picked up the glass, but didn't drink. What would you have me do? Something you haven't done in 800 years. Miles met his eyes. Prove that the man in the car was real. Not with words, not with a speech. She needs students, real ones. Help her in the way that respects what she does, not in the way that makes you feel noble. You are suggesting I use my network to. I am suggesting you help her in the way that respects what she does for a living, rather than in the way that makes you feel noble. He pushed the glass closer. Drink, think, and stop breaking phones. We are running out of plausible explanations. SFX, glass set down on stone, silence. Tense. Griffin drank. He lifted the glass and drank the way a man dying of thirst drinks water, not with pleasure but with need, the deep involuntary pull of something his body required to continue existing. The blood was warm against his lips, thick and mineral, and for a moment his eyes shifted, the gray darkening to smoke, the amber ring flaring at the edges of his irises. His hand tightened on the glass. The muscle at his jaw worked once, twice. Then he set the glass down, half empty, and wiped his mouth with a precision that suggested centuries of practice at making the act look civilized. Better? Miles asked. Whispered, adequate. His eyes faded back to gray. It tastes like nothing. It tastes like O-negative 2024, a perfectly serviceable vintage. It tastes like nothing because the only thing I want. He stopped. Set the glass down. Never mind. The only thing you want is to hear her say, "That's not how parking works." Miles finished for him. Yes. I gathered. What if she doesn't want to hear from me? Then you respect that. Miles' voice softened. But you might consider that there are ways to help someone that don't involve showing up, that don't require her to look at you or forgive you or even know it's you. He said it gently, the way he said most things, with the patience of someone who had been watching Griffin make noble, lonely mistakes for a very long time, and who had decided centuries ago that the best he could do was hand him a glass of blood and point him in the right direction. Chapter 5, The Pass, SFX, phone ringing, office ambiance. It started with a phone call. Ivy's Driving Academy. Hi, yes, my daughter needs lessons. A friend recommended you. Oh, great. Which friend? He didn't leave a name, just said you were the best instructor in the city. Then another, and another, and another. 6 new students in a week, then 8, then 12. Real students, paying real rates, booking real lessons. Her schedule, which had been bleeding empty slots for months, was suddenly full. Over full. She had a wait list. She hadn't had a wait list since she opened. She couldn't trace the referrals. Every student said the same thing. A friend recommended her. Which friend? Couldn't remember. Heard great things. Saw a review online. She checked online. There were reviews. Dozens of new 5-star reviews on Google and Yelp. All different voices. All specific enough to be real. Outstanding instructor. Patient, thorough, and genuinely cares about her students' safety. Best driving school in the city. Worth every penny. I was terrified of highway merging, and Ivy had me confident in 3 lessons. She sat in her car after the last lesson of the day and stared at the reviews on her phone. She read them again. She read the pattern. Then she called the number she'd told herself she'd deleted. Miles answered on the second ring. Miss Kessler. It's him, isn't it? The students. A pause. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Miles? A longer pause. Warm. He asked me not to tell you. Of course he did. He was very clear that it should not be traceable. No money, no grand gestures. Just people who actually needed lessons. Pointed in your direction. She closed her eyes. Not money, not a payoff. Students, real business. The thing she actually needed. The thing that respected her work instead of buying it. How, she asked. He has a network, Miles said carefully. People who owe him favors. People who know people. He simply suggested that if they or anyone they knew required driving instruction, there was an academy worth supporting. A beat. He also wrote 11 of the reviews himself. I wrote the other 6. He has a surprisingly competent grasp of conversational Yelp prose. She laughed. It came out wet and shaky and unexpected. He wrote Yelp reviews. He spent 3 hours on them. He was very concerned about authenticity. He asked me whether genuinely cares about her students' safety sounded too formal. Miles paused. I told him it sounded like a vampire pretending to be a satisfied customer, which is exactly what it was. He also broke 2 phones writing them. He broke phones, writing Yelp reviews. The first cracked on the apostrophe in students. The second survived the full text, but shattered when he clicked submit. He described himself as overly enthusiastic about the final keystroke. I have started buying them in bulk. Miles. Yes? Is he okay? The pause was the longest yet. Sad. He is standing in front of his refrigerator, Miles said. He has been standing in front of his refrigerator intermittently for a week. He has a lemon in there that I believe has achieved sentience. He is, in my professional assessment, miserable. Good, she said. Then, not good. I don't mean good. I understood. She hung up. She sat in the Civic for a long time. The sun was going down. The empty parking lot was turning gold, and then amber, and then blue. He hadn't shown up with roses. He hadn't made a speech. He hadn't bought her building or paid off her debts. He'd sent her students. Actual students who actually needed to learn to drive. He'd respected her enough to help in the way that mattered, quietly, without asking for credit or forgiveness. It was, she thought, the most competent thing he'd done since she met him. SFX. Fluorescent hum, distant chatter, shuffling papers. The DMV on a Wednesday morning was its usual purgatory of fluorescent lights and quiet despair. Ivy was between appointments, checking her schedule, when the door opened and a man walked in who did not belong in a DMV. Griffin Holloway stood in the entrance, blinking against the overhead lights. He was wearing a dark coat, but not the dramatic one, a normal coat. His ring was on his right hand and she could see now the fine tension in his jaw, the way the muscles at his temples tightened under the fluorescent glare. The lights hurt him. She understood that now. Even with the ring, daylight and its artificial cousins were an endurance test. He was here anyway. He walked to the counter and spoke to Brenda, the clerk, who processed him with her usual expression of aggressively neutral competence. He didn't produce a stack of hundreds. He paid the standard test fee with a debit card. Then he sat in the plastic chair section and waited. She walked over to him. He looked up. His eyes were their usual gray, but there were shadows in them, the kind that had nothing to do with lighting. You have an appointment, she said. I do. You paid the normal fee. I did. She sat down next to him. The plastic chair squeaked. Why are you here, Griffin? He looked at his hands, resting on his knees, still, always still. I would like to take my driving test, a real one. I would like to learn to drive properly from you, and I would like to fail or pass on my own merit. You can already drive. I can operate a vehicle. I have never learned from someone. There is a difference. He looked at her. I was dishonest. For 10 weeks I performed incompetence because I was afraid that honesty would end the only interaction I have had in a century that felt real. I was wrong. The dishonesty ended it instead. Griffin, I am not here with a speech. Miles specifically forbade speeches. He also forbade roses, dramatic lighting, and any reference to the Battle of Agincourt. He paused. I am here with a debit card and a standard appointment and the intention of being a real student, if you will have me. She looked at him, at the ring on his hand, the fine tension in his jaw from the lights, the careful way he held himself in a plastic chair in a beige room, surrounded by ordinary people, doing the most mundane thing imaginable. An 800-year-old vampire king, sitting in the DMV, paying the standard fee, asking to be taught. Firm, get in the car, she said. He drove. He didn't drive perfectly. He braked too hard at the first stop sign, hard enough that the seatbelts caught. He signaled a beat late for the left turn on Elm, and his hands on the wheel were wrong. Not the preternatural stillness she'd grown used to, but a faint, barely perceptible tremor. She'd seen that tremor 1,000 times. On teenagers. On 60-year-olds getting back behind the wheel after an accident. On every student who was genuinely trying and genuinely scared of failing. He was nervous. An 800-year-old vampire king was nervous about a driving test. Warm. You're gripping too tight, she said. Relax your hands. I am relaxed. You're white-knuckling the wheel. Loosen your pinkies. He loosened his pinkies. The tremor eased by a fraction. You're overcompensating on the brakes, she said at the next stop. You're trying so hard not to use your strength that you're jerking the pedal. Don't think about what you are. Think about where you want the car to stop, and let your foot find it. I have never had to moderate, firm. I know, but this is what I do. I teach people to drive. You're a person. Let me teach you. Something in his face shifted. The mask, the composure, the 8 centuries of control. They didn't drop, but they loosened. He looked at her and she saw for the first time, not the king, not the predator, not the charming eccentric, but a man who had never in his very long life been a beginner at anything and had no idea how. Again, she said, next intersection, smooth stop. Trust the pedal. He stopped. Smoothly, not perfectly. A slight hitch at the end, the kind every student had in their first real lesson. But smooth. Better, she said. Better, he agreed. And the relief in his voice was so human it almost hurt. They drove the full route. She marked the form honestly. 2 minor deductions for the braking, 1 for mirror check timing. Everything else clean. They pulled back into the DMV course. The parallel parking section. 3 orange cones, standing in a neat line, cheerful and oblivious. Griffin stopped the car and looked at them. Amused. Old friends, he said. Don't get sentimental about traffic cones. I have a complicated relationship with traffic cones. Park the car, Griffin. He put the car in reverse. He turned the wheel. The Civic eased backward into the space. Not elegantly, not with supernatural precision, but with the careful, measured competence of a person who had been taught well and was trying his best. 1 cone wobbled. Didn't fall. The car settled into the space with reasonable clearance on both sides. He put it in park. He turned off the engine. Ivy, he said. Yes, whispered. I do not require a license. His voice was low, stripped of everything formal, everything managed, everything 800 years old. Just a man's voice, in a car, saying the truest thing he knew. I require you. She looked at her clipboard, at the form with its honest marks, its real deductions, its genuine assessment. She drew a check mark in the pass box. Warm. You passed, she said. Did I? Barely. Your braking needs work. I will practice. And you're still too formal with the turn signal. I will endeavor to be more casual with the turn signal. And Griffin. Yes. She leaned across the center console. His skin was cool when she put her hand on his cheek, cool like stone in shade. And she felt the muscle in his jaw release under her palm, felt 8 centuries of held breath let go. She kissed him. In a Honda Civic, in the DMV parking lot, with a wobbling orange cone visible through the back window. It tasted like cold night air and old libraries, and a loneliness she was just beginning to understand. And underneath all of it, something new, something that hadn't been there before. That, she said, pulling back, is the most unhinged thing I've ever done. Is it working? He asked. And the ghost of a smile, a real one, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than composure, crossed his face. Drive me home, she said. My place. He started the engine. And Griffin, you're coming in. I'm inviting you. He understood. The invitation, the threshold. The only door a vampire cannot open for himself. Ivy, he said, his voice low and warm with something she was fairly sure was joy. I accept. Her apartment was small. He was aware of this in the way he was aware of most things, with an immediate total clarity that made the cramped space feel simultaneously absurd and sacred. The ceiling was low, the couch was short. An orange cat of considerable volume occupied the center of it, with the territorial confidence of a minor sovereign. That's Marmalade, Ivy said. He is substantial. He's on a diet, theoretically. Griffin sat on the couch. Marmalade regarded him with the slow, evaluative stare of a creature deciding whether a new arrival was a threat or a heated surface. After a long moment, the cat climbed onto Griffin's lap, circled twice, and settled with a possessive thud. He likes you, Ivy said, from the kitchen. He is sitting on me. Is that the same thing? With marmalade, it's as close as you get. She returned with 2 mugs. One for her, one for him. He looked at it. I made you tea, she said. Out of habit. You don't drink tea. No. I know, she sat beside him. I made it anyway. He held the mug. It was warm in his cold hands, a small, ordinary thing, radiating heat he could feel, but not generate. Whispered. No one has ever made me tea, he said. What? In 800 years. No one has made me a cup of tea. People have offered me blood, wine, tribute, fealty, alliances, treaties. But no one has handed me a mug of tea, because it was the thing you do when someone comes to your home. His voice was very quiet. His hands, wrapped around the ceramic, were very still. It's just tea, she said. It is not just tea. He looked at the mug, and the 800 years were there in his eyes, the full impossible weight of them. But alongside something she'd never seen before, a bewilderment so total it looked like wonder. The kind of bewilderment that comes from encountering something genuinely new after centuries of assuming there was nothing new left. It is the most. I do not have the vocabulary for what this is. It's chamomile, ivy, with honey. Ivy. He looked at her, and whatever composure he had left, whatever managed, practiced, centuries polished surface he'd been maintaining, cracked open entirely. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a fracture, letting something raw and unprotected show through. Thank you, she leaned into him. His shoulder was cool against her cheek. He held the tea he couldn't drink, and the cat he'd just met purred on his lap, and the apartment was small and warm and alive in every way he was not. This is very small, he said after a while. It's a normal apartment. It is very small and very warm, and there is a cat on my lap, and I cannot recall the last time I felt this. He stopped. This what? Whispered. Present, he said. Outside, the city hummed its ordinary hum. The traffic lights changed on schedule, indifferent to the fact that one of the cars obeying them had been driven, that afternoon, by someone who predated them by several centuries. On the fridge, her work calendar showed a full week. Every slot taken, real students, real lessons, a real business pulling itself back from the edge. And on Tuesday at 6, written in her own hand, Griffin H., Lesson 17, she'd figure out what they were practicing later,